All right, let's just get right into it. For 10,000 years, the Imperium of Man has claimed that it endures right. Against all logic, against every single prediction, and honestly, against enemies that absolutely should have wiped it out centuries ago, humanity's vast empire still stands. But if you dig deep into the hidden Imperial archives, there's a far more disturbing question waiting for you. What if survival actually isn't proof of strength at all? What if it's actually evidence of a slow-motion collapse? Think about it. When historians look at the Imperium's greatest victories, this really grim pattern starts to emerge. Every single victory seems to leave humanity weaker than before. Every crisis consumes resources that literally can never be replaced. I mean, every century closes out with fewer worlds, fewer soldiers, fewer ships, and definitely fewer answers. And if you believe some of the forbidden records out there, the Imperium might have already crossed the point of no return. The terrifying possibility here, humanity isn't fighting to win anymore. They're just fighting to delay the inevitable. Picture the galactic map for a second. If you highlight the isolated Imperial sectors, you're gonna see hundreds of them just blinking red. We're talking about distant warp storms actively swallowing up entire regions of space as we speak. Now, at first glance, sure, the Imperium appears completely invincible. A million worlds, countless billions of soldiers, Titan legions that can literally level entire continents. You've got the mighty Space Marine chapters, the Adeptus Mechanicus sitting on all that ancient tech, and of course, the Imperial Navy. We're talking fleets so massive that entire planetary populations spend their whole lives building just one battleship. On paper, no human civilization has ever wielded this kind of power. But you know, appearances can be incredibly deceptive. The Imperium isn't a modern state. It's an empire barely held together by ancient traditions, totally fragile supply chains, heavy religious dogma, and systems so bloated and bureaucratic that entire wars can start and finish before the paperwork is even officially filed. Just imagine these colossal administratum vaults, right, stacked endlessly with parchment that's centuries old, clerks processing ancient documents, and entire star systems waiting decades for reinforcements that, let's be real, are never going to show up. And this creates our first really hidden problem. The sheer size of the Imperium isn't just an advantage, it's a massive, glaring weakness. I mean, imagine trying to govern an entire galaxy using slow communication, incredibly unreliable warp travel, and institutions that genuinely actively fear innovation. Even under perfect conditions, a system like that is gonna struggle. But the Imperium, it does not get perfect conditions. It exists in literally the most hostile galaxy imaginable. And every single year, that galaxy gets more dangerous. So the real question isn't how powerful the Imperium is. The real question is, are its enemies growing faster than it can adapt? And honestly, the evidence really suggests they are. For centuries, Imperial strategists could at least identify the major threats out there. You had orcs, Eldar, chaos warbands, your localized rebellions. Dangerous, for sure, but manageable. Then the Tyranids showed up, and almost immediately, military planners had this horrifying realization. The hive fleets humanity had already fought might just be advanced tendrils, fragments, scouting parties basically. Literally, nobody knows how much of their species is still lurking out there in the dark, way beyond the galactic rim. And this is where the raw mathematics become downright terrifying. Think about the contrast. The Imperium wins battles, right? But the Tyranids consume entire worlds. The Imperium needs decades to train a specialist. The Tyranids, they just spin up new organisms in a matter of moments. The Imperium replaces its losses through slow recruitment. The Tyranids replace theirs by literally eating entire ecosystems. When you break it down, Every single war of attrition heavily favors the swarm. But here's the kicker. The Tyranids are just one threat. Because while humanity is desperately struggling against these invasions, something ancient is waking up. Right beneath humanity's feet, silent legions are marching out of underground vaults lit up by the green lightning of awakening Necron tomb worlds. These are dynasties way older than human civilization itself. They've got armies equipped with technology that frankly looks completely indistinguishable from magic. Weapons that can literally erase targets from reality, machines that manipulate stars, devices that actually distort time itself. And the truly frightening part here isn't simply their power, it's their potential. So many Necron empires are actually still dormant. A lot of their dynasties remain fractured, and their leaders are really just starting to consolidate control. To put that in perspective, humanity might not even be facing the Necrons at full strength yet, not even close. But honestly, even that isn't the Imperium's biggest problem. Because external enemies, you can fight those. Internal decay, though, that's far more dangerous. You've got cargo fleets completely vanishing into warp storms, supply routes just breaking apart all across the galaxy, leaving these isolated planets desperately begging for aid. And we all know wars aren't won by heroism alone. They're won with ammunition, fuel, food, transportation, maintenance, communication. The Imperium is constantly struggling with all of those. If you pull just one link out of that chain, entire regions just start collapsing. And then came what is arguably one of the most devastating events in all of Imperial history, the opening of the Great Rift. Reality literally tore itself apart across the galaxy. It basically split the stars right in two, and it didn't just cause military chaos. It completely shattered logistics. It isolated whole worlds. It turned navigation into an absolute nightmare. All of a sudden, planetary governors couldn't even contact Terra. Fleets just vanished into thin air. Reinforcements never arrived. Planets that had faithfully served the Imperium for thousands of years suddenly woke up to find themselves completely, totally alone. And as we know, isolation breeds desperation. Desperation breeds rebellion. And rebellion, that creates the perfect breeding ground for chaos corruption. Which brings up another genuinely terrifying possibility, something we really need to think about. What if chaos actually doesn't need to conquer the Imperium? What if chaos just needs the Imperium to keep existing exactly as it is right now? I mean, think about the hive cities out there completely drowning in pollution. Think about the endless wars consuming whole generations and the cults spreading through these massively overcrowded populations. Chaos feeds on raw emotion, right? Fear, hatred, despair, violence. And the Imperium, it generates all of those on a colossal scale. Every oppressive policy, every planetary catastrophe, it all just creates the perfect conditions for chaos to thrive. It sparks one of the darkest debates among Warhammer scholars today. Is the Imperium actually defeating chaos, or are they, quite literally, unintentionally sustaining it? And that question gets even more uncomfortable when you look at the Emperor himself. For 10,000 years, the entirety of humanity has relied on a single figure. Hidden away under vast machinery on Terra is the Golden Throne, keeping a corpse-like god alive through just unimaginable sacrifice. You have the astronomic and guiding navigation, and entire massive institutions that exist just to keep these systems running. But here's the thing, total dependence creates total vulnerability. If the Emperor really is the foundation of humanity, what happens if that foundation cracks? Official records get super vague on this. Certain archives are permanently sealed. People start asking questions that absolutely nobody has the answers to. Meanwhile, the military situation on the ground just keeps deteriorating because every single victory demands these extraordinary, completely unsustainable sacrifices. Just look at some of humanity's greatest triumphs. Cadia held back the Eye of Terror for millennia, but eventually Cadia fell. Baal survived the Tyranids, sure, but only through absolutely devastating losses. Armageddon endured invasion after invasion, but at an enormous cost. Time and time again, the Imperium survives, but that survival is starting to look a lot more like a strategic retreat across shattered fortress worlds, with casualty reports just piling endlessly higher. And this highlights one of the most overlooked realities of Imperial warfare. The Imperium simply is not replacing its losses efficiently. Ancient technologies are being completely lost. Crucial knowledge disappears. Highly trained specialists die off. Manufacturing capabilities are in a steady decline. You have forge worlds preserving machines that they don't even fully understand anymore. Imagine trying to fight a massive galactic war while slowly forgetting how your own civilization actually works. That is the reality the Imperium is living in. And while humanity is scrambling just to preserve these ancient systems, their enemies are adapting, mutating, multiplying, and waking up. The balance of power is shifting, and it's shifting relentlessly. But then there was this massive glimmer of hope. Roboute Guilliman returned. For a lot of citizens, his return was literally salvation. A Primarch came back, a living son of the Emperor, finally a commander who actually understands the sheer scale of the Imperium's problems. And to be totally fair to him, Guilliman has achieved some extraordinary things. For the first time in centuries, we saw some genuine forward momentum as the Indomitus Crusade stabilized countless regions. The Primaris Marines seriously bolstered their forces, and some much-needed administrative reforms actually improved efficiency. But there's an uncomfortable detail here that gets overlooked a lot. Even Guilliman himself seems deeply alarmed by what he's found. Walking through these decaying bureaucratic halls, he honestly reacts less like this triumphant savior, and way more like a guy who just realized his father's empire is dangerously close to total collapse. Because at the end of the day, even a Primarch has limits. He can't be everywhere at once. He can't just wave a hand and reverse 10,000 years of steady decline overnight. And most importantly, he can't eliminate the core pressures threatening humanity. The galaxy is still hostile, the Great Rift is still wide open, and those staggering losses just keep piling up. So that leads us right to the central mystery here. If the Imperium is truly doomed, how on earth has it survived for this long? Well, the answer might be way more disturbing than you'd expect, because doom doesn't always show up overnight. Sometimes collapse just becomes the new normal. You have armies marching right past crumbling ancient monuments, relying on decaying infrastructure that is somehow miraculously still functioning. And nobody really notices, because every new generation just grows accustomed to a slightly worse state of decay. From that perspective, the Imperium might already be living right in the middle of its own collapse, just a prolonged, agonizing decline stretched out over millennia. It's like a giant lumbering structure that's only still moving because it hasn't quite realized it's supposed to have fallen over yet. And yet, there's another way to look at this. It's an interpretation that,